to Rainforest Flora. Have any of you been here before? One or two? Well, it's an interesting nursery. As you walk around and look at it, you'll see there's not really another nursery that's like it. We're pretty specialized in these plants that don't need any dirt, that are getting to be very popular these days. And we started doing this 41 years ago.
Wow.
And we're still doing it.
Hey, all right.
Which is kind of amazing. But anyway, the plants grow with no dirt because they can get all of their water and nutrient requirements through the leaves. And that's a huge thing. That'd be like people being able to breathe underwater. The fact that they can get their water and nutrients through the leaves frees them from having to be in soil, which is where everybody else has to be. And so if you picture Latin America, you picture the Amazon, this teeming jungle, and everybody's fighting for space, then these guys have been able to go up the trees and into the tops of the trees and then out from the trees into the savanna, and now a lot of the most popular types grow in Latin American deserts. And they're endemic to the Western Hemisphere because they're basically the newest plants on Earth. They came in since the last time the continent split apart. So we only find them from the southern U.S. with Spanish moss all the way down through Chile and Argentina. And you know, they're actually very much what people want in this day and age where nobody has any time or space. They're interesting to look at when they're not in flower. They have beautiful flowers. Some of them, like this crocata, you can smell this when you have the chance. The flowers are very fragrant. Most of them are pollinated by hummingbirds because the flowers are evolved to appeal to hummingbirds. They have bright colors. And so they're either pollinated by moths and butterflies, which are the fragrant ones, or they're pollinated by hummingbirds. So back in the early days, in the 70s and 80s, my partner and I took turns and we went down to different countries and we tried to find the plants and we tried to get them back up here safely, and it didn't work a lot of times, but it did work sometimes, enough so that we were able to keep going. And for the last 30 years or so, we've been working on producing our own plants instead of getting them from down there. It's a really long time to grow. And when you get something like this or this, you won't see these in any stores. You know, the ones that you see in the stores are little tchotchke guys. But these take, you know, a solid 20, 25 years to produce from the seed. And so there aren't very many of them yet. And we need a long wire for them.
Paul, were those hybrids that you made?
Yeah.
So those
hybrids.
those actually took years to make the first hybrid, and then to propagate them takes to have stock to sell.
Years. Yeah, that's why you've been doing it 41 years, and we're really still just starting. So the plants are getting to be really popular because they don't take over. You can go on vacation for a month and it's okay. They'll take temperatures to freezing. If they dry out, you can put them under water overnight and they'll rehydrate. And you can put them just about anywhere. You can put them in a low light area like a closet or a shoebox for a month and they'll still be okay. But eventually they like lots of light. That's the key thing. They like bright light. And then they need to get enough water. And people are told, oh, just mist them once in a while, right? Has anybody been told just mist them? And does that work? Or not? You know, it can work fine, but it also can be that they don't get watered quite enough and then they gradually dry out. Or conversely, you can be watering them with misting them and a little bit too frequently and then they rot. So they can go those two ways. If you take them and you stick them underwater, take them out, turn them upside down and put them back and do that about once a week, that's, I think, the safest way to do it, because they can't be too wet too long and they probably won't dry out either. And then it's just a case of getting bright light.
Do you set overnight to dip them in water?
Only
Or
if they
just for a
dry
few?
out. If there's a picture here in my book that shows the plant, what happens, what they look like when they they get too dry, most of them. You can see the top picture on this page,
Yes.
and you can see how the leaves are all curled up.
Yeah.
Has anybody had that happen?
Yeah.
Okay. That means you weren't watering it enough or frequently enough. So if you put it underwater overnight, the bottom picture is the same plant the next day. So that's the key thing. And if you know that, then you should be good. And if you don't know it, then you lose them. You know, but that's one of the great things about the plants is that they can be rehydrated if they're dried out. You know, if you have an orchid or most other plants, if they dry out, it's over. Start over again. Yeah, that's the second one. This is pause. The first edition took 4.5 years to produce, and it was all my nights and weekends for 4.5 years back in the 80s. Came out in 87, and then eventually it sold out. That was the end of it, but then the internet came in, and then people started trading them online, and it was, they were hundreds of dollars. So I did another one so that it would be cheaper, and so that's the second one. That came out about 5 years ago. We still have lots of those.
I think the first edition is going for about $350 now.
Yeah, something like that. This one's it's 72, and you're welcome to take a look at it. It's actually quite a bit better than the first one because it has a lot more color pictures, and it has a whole chapter on the hybrids that didn't exist when we did the first book. And you can see how pretty the plants are. And then you haven't walked around yet, but you'll see the pond, and there's a lot of information in it. There's that's the thing that was the hardest part was having enough correct information so that the book would stand the test of time, that people could actually learn a lot. Because the more you learn about these plants, the more interesting they become. We're all familiar with bromeliads now, like in the ceramic bowls behind you. And those are gorgeous, and they have the most color and size and last the longest for price of any plant, which is why they're so popular. But people use those to decorate. They don't sit there and really learn about them because, what is there to learn? Whereas with the air plants, the more you learn about how they grow and why they grow and how come they're so different looking. There's just so many things to learn about the plants that are interesting. So that's why I got into them in the first place. I just couldn't believe plants could grow with no dirt.
Paul, about how many species? How many species do you think there are?
Pardon me?
About how many species?
I think there are probably around 700 or 800 now. I'm not sure. And a lot of them are green leafy things with green inflorescences that nobody cares about. But the ones that people like, that look really interesting, are more from the deserts. And of those, there are probably about 300 different kinds. And we've probably made at least that many hybrids.
And there's more hybrids around the world too.
Yeah, so we ship a lot of these to Asia. It's pretty interesting. A lot of Asians don't have big houses, and so space is at a premium, and so they'll take these and they'll use the tilly hanger wire and they'll string them together and hang them next to the kitchen window, or they'll have their balcony with the sliding glass doors on the 10th floor, and they'll just go and they'll make a curtain that goes across the balcony. It's really cool looking. Really neat.
Did you put it into direct light all day in the sun?
If all of you live around Long Beach area, most of these will sit in full sun fine, especially the grayer ones. You'll want to water them a little bit more frequently, but most of them are fine. The white fuzz on the leaves reflects up to 73% of the light that hits the leaf. So they like bright light. A lot of these are from Latin American deserts, like I said, and so they get a lot of light. The difference between there and here is that it's drier. But the nice thing about Long Beach is that it's more humid than it is in Simi Valley or Fontana. So it's easier. So
Different bloom times?
most of them bloom in the winter. Their normal life cycle is to bloom in the winter, get pollinated by the hummingbirds, and then the seeds have to mature, and open and then fly around before the onset of the rainy season in the summertime. And so the seeds all have a fuzzy cottony attachment on them. They look like a dandelion in that sense. They have a fuzzy cottony attachment because they're high on cliffs or in trees. If they had regular seeds, they just come down. So this way they can float around. The fuzz is shaped like a parachute. It has a radial spread at the top, filaments, and the seed at the bottom. And they can float hundreds of miles and they catch on something and then they start to grow.
So if you have it in your house, how do you have it pollinate?
Pardon me?
How do you pollinate a plant if it's in a
Well,
house?
I mean, we have resident hummingbirds, but we do it too. And you know, you can use a brush or a hair or something, and you have to take the pollen from the anthers of one plant and go to the stigma of another plant. You can't do it on the same plant. But yeah, I mean, we've done that for so many years now.
So there's male and female plants?
No, they're male and female on the same plant, but they're just not self-pollinating.
Can you tell from those flowers?
No, they're all the same, but there's a subgenus of Tillandsia called Diaphoranthema, like Spanish moss. It's what they say cleistogamous. They're self-pollinating. Flowers don't open and they're self-pollinating. It's all the miniature species. But all the normal ones that are bigger, you have to go from one plant to another plant. But they both have male and female on each plant. But you got to go from one plant to another plant. And then you can make hybrids by going from this flower to this flower, this flower to this flower.
And how do you know where exactly to put it?
Well, it's got to be inside the flower. The stigma and the anthers are, and this is, you know, these smell really good, but like this one is subgenus Anaplophytum, and the stigma, which is the female part, and the anthers that have the pollen are down inside the floral tube. And then a lot of the species have flowers where the stigma sticks out and the anthers stick out, so you can see them, and that's easier than with these guys. But I mean, you can still do it.
But-
You just got to go down inside.
But the main way that people would have enjoyment is that the plants bloom and then they pup, and you just grow the pups.
Yeah,
And eventually
they
you
all
have
offset.
offset. You have these giant
So when
balls
you look
eventually.
overhead and you see the big clumps, they all started from one plant.
Growing them from seed is rather difficult.
So
Even after you started with Sarah, how you found your first one?
I found, okay, so the question is, how did I ever get started in something like this? And the answer is, when I was in college, I had a herpetology class, reptiles and amphibians, and the teaching assistant and I got to be good friends, and I went over to his house one day, and he had these plants hanging in his patio, and I just couldn't believe that what I was looking at was real, you know? I mean, they looked like they were from outer space or the bottom of the ocean, and they were not in any dirt. And I'm not a plant guy particularly, you know, but I just couldn't believe that. And then a few years after I got out of school, I had always wanted to kind of start my own business. My dad was a painting contractor, and they always said, go to work for GGE, don't fight it. And of course, being a young guy, I didn't listen to him. And then I was trying to figure out something I could do, and I liked the plants a lot, and I looked around, and nobody had ever tried to sell them to the public before. So a friend of mine and I got a Jeep Wagoneer, and we drove from LA down to Cabo San Lucas, and we ferried over to Puerto Vallarta, and we drove all around Mexico and the Yucatan Peninsula and Belize and then into Guatemala. And then when I came back from that, I took the plants that I'd sent back and started gluing them on pieces of driftwood and selling them at the Rose Bowl swap meet. And that's how it started, 41 years ago. That's funny because, you know, so the swap meet was one thing, but it finally got the courage to try and sell the plants to like the nurseries, and I went to a few different places, and I got them to take them on consignment, and I never went back. I don't know why, I never went back, and finally a year or two later I saw somebody that was going, why didn't you ever come back? We sold them, you know, and you know, it takes a while to get going. It really took, it took a while to get going, and we started. There was a chain store here in California called Gemco, which was everybody's favorite chain.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was terrible when Asher Edelman did what he did.
I had a friend that even was crying for a week.
Yeah. So we sold the Gemco's and we built up through that chain. They gave us 5 test stores. That was successful. And over time, I think they had about 86 stores. And we were just poised to do a whole promotion at Christmas. It was a spread order for all the stores we had. We finally made it. And then in October, Lucky had to get rid of Gemco to keep Asher Edelman from killing Lucky. Because that was in the corporate raider days in the early 80s, where guys would go in and destroy companies in order to get rich. And so Lucky had to get rid of Gemco in order to get enough money to keep this guy out. And and then Target got a bunch of the stores. And what happened with us is that we've gotten to be friends with a lot of these people that we worked, sold to over the years. And so, right then at that time, this outfit called Price Club started up. And some of them went to work there. And then Home Depot started up out here, and some of them went to work there. And so we started selling to those stores, and then they grew, and then we grew. And then you had a few years ago when everything fell apart. So it's always interesting.
But Paul, your first nursery was over in Gardena?
No, the first nursery was my house. And then after a few months of selling out of the house, I had a competitor, and he turned me into the building department. And they came over right when I was packing an order going to Northern California. So what that did is to make me get a store that much sooner. So we got a store on Venice Boulevard in Palms, right next door to the headquarters, world headquarters for the Hare Krishnas, across the street from the Brotman Hospital. And so we were there for a year and a half, and then we outgrew that, and then we were in Mar Vista for a year and a half in a big greenhouse there. And then that property got turned into senior citizens apartments. And so then we ended up moving to Gardena on Rosecrans between Van Ness and Western. And we were there on a couple of acres of buffer land for Edison, and we were there for 21 years. But then the PUC got involved in trying to deregulate electricity. And of course, when you have people in government who've never been in business, and all they do is they boss people around, they make these rules that they don't understand the consequences. And one of the rules that they made was that Edison had to get rid of everything that didn't have to do with the distribution of power. And then they regulated the wholesale side, but they didn't regulate the retail. One side they regulated, which side they regulated the retail side, but not the wholesale side. So Edison got killed, and we had that whole big mess. But one of the things they had to do was they had this little 2-acre buffer land behind their substation there that they had to get rid of. And we wanted to buy it, but it was a long saga and a terrible story. But eventually, what happened was the company next door, Neeson Foods, that makes a cup of noodles. So we'll take it, and they gave them $1 million for the 2 acres, and we're not in the real estate business. So we had to leave again. And so then this place was a tree nursery for 47 years, and the guy was 3rd generation, and he realized he didn't have to work that hard, so he turned into a sod nursery instead of trees. And all you need is a little postage stamp sized place, so he didn't need this. So we ended up having to buy his lease, or actually we had to pay him to sign his lease over to us. And then we moved here and started building this in 2000. So it's 15 years ago. So keeps you young.
Keeps you on your toes.
Keeps you on your toes. It's, I always, you got to say life's easy for everybody except for you, right? It probably isn't, but you have to think that way because you have to do what you have to do, you got to stay alive, and, you just can't ever give up is the main thing. You just can't ever give up, and you just got to keep trying. And so now, the neat thing for us is that the plants are really beautiful, and we're producing them ourselves, and we do sell to the depots, and we ship to nurseries and all over the world, and it's not easy, but we're doing it. So.
Did you ever have to go back where you got the original bunch?
I haven't made a trip down there in a long time, and I'd really like to. Not with having to do it, but just because it would be fun to go and, part of it was a lot of fun. I mean, you got to meet people and stuff, but part of it was dangerous. And lot of it was really hard because there was a lot of pressure. You had to find the plants, you had to figure out how to get them out, and get them clean to get them out, and it just, a lot of times things went wrong, you know, like the weather, the culture, the language, the airlines, the customs, the ag.
The export laws have changed too, right, Paul?
Most of the countries, you can't get the plants anymore. The only country left that's allowing collection out of the jungles on a really large scale is Guatemala. And the rest of them are pretty much shut down. So,
Website.
www.rainforestflora.com is our website. And the website actually has a lot of cool stuff on it. Hundreds of photos of the plants. And people order online. It's easy to do. So,
Can you tell us about this rainforest?
plants that the baby ones grow up. Yeah, you could, if you wanted to put this in soil, you can just dig a little